right, thank you, everyone. CRPN Central, this is Dr. Fox. Please like, comment, subscribe. It helps the mission more than you know so that I can do more for you. Welcome, everyone, on a Monday. I had an interesting 2 a.m. thought, and I wanted to see what you thought about it, especially with our professionals in the world. I feel like all of the technology that we're getting nowadays, I feel like it's creating an endangered species in our minds, and that is patience. I've noticed that nobody is patient anymore, whether it's they want food, whether it's they're on a career path and they're impatient, they want boom, 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 whether it's they want immediate data. I feel like patience is something that people are just forgetting how to do. Um, I don't know. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about technology? I mean, I love the efficiency. I love what it can do. I love the improvements that it makes. But sometimes I feel like we as human beings are not becoming patient anymore. And I don't know. There's my 2 o'clock thought for the day. Welcome to TrialSide Chats. This is Dr. Fox. TrialSide Chats is the place where CRPN communities can come together. We can talk about things. We can make sure that we can learn from each other, raise each other up, especially about clinical research finance. Just remember, CRPN Central and CRPN, the Clinical Research Payment Network, is free for sites to join. It's free trial opportunities, and it's demonstrated affordable for our clinical research sponsors and CROs. You will save money and time and maintain or increase the quality of your clinical trials when you work with Clinical Research Payment Network. Check it out. Go to the website, send me a message. I'd love to have a chat with you about it. I have made clinical research my life, and I'd love to share what we do and what our mission is with you. So let's bring on to the stage our discussion. Full disclosure, full disclaimer, I am not a lawyer. I never said I was, and I never will be. This is strictly experience. If you need a lawyer, contact Edie Edens, Edie Law. I know she just got back from Scope. So hi, Edie, if you're watching. If not, I hope you're resting well. By continuing to view this video, you have acknowledged this disclaimer, and you will view at your own risk based off of the decisions that you make. If you do not agree with this, please turn off that video right now. I'm not interested in the stream. I value much more your safety and your understanding. All right, so ground rules for the TrialSide chats. We're going to talk about some pretty confidential stuff here. It's sensitive stuff. We have to be very careful when we talk about it. So it's anything clinical research finance. This must be confidential. We're not naming names. We're not naming organizations. We're only talking about concepts and case studies. And as a result of going through case studies, we're going to target best practices to try to help each other be better in the industry so that everybody can succeed. All right. Let's start with this one. This one hit me by surprise. It was a pretty fitting week for this one, honestly. It says, negotiations stress me out. Do you have any pointers? Very good question. If negotiations stress you out, raise your hand. My hand's up. You can't see it on the camera. Do negotiations stress you out? My guess is if you're in this industry and you negotiate at some point in time, you're going to get stressed out over it. Someone's going to try to bully you into a trial, a budget. They may try to go contact or go over your head and go talk to an administrator to try to get you to accept a bad budget. They may just sit there and say, well, if you don't take our super low budget, just don't take the trial. They'll sit there and say you're more expensive than all the other sites. Don't worry, sites. Everyone hears that. It's just a tactic. But yes, negotiations stress me out too, very much so. So much so, and I've been so stressed out over negotiations that I've had to put a lot of guardrails in my life around it. So number one, Alan Abraham, you're my buddy here. Never take it personally. You can never, ever take a negotiation personally, ever. It's strictly business. They either want to do business with you or they don't, and you need a certain amount of money to do that business properly. Otherwise, you're going to be wasting everyone's money. So never take it personally. Another pointer that I always like during negotiations is you never do it alone. So you ever notice when you do a negotiation with a CRO, they always say, oh, well, we got this word back from our team. We got this back from the sponsor. Our Our budget team took a look at this. I had my project manager view this. They never ever do their negotiations alone. There's a team behind them dedicated to trying to ensure that they can get sites to agree to services at the lowest possible rate. There's a giant psychological game around that. And sites, you can do it too. Who's to say that you as a negotiator don't have to be like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go back to the team. We're going to discuss this. I'm going to go back to my financial ethics committee. We're going to discuss this. They're going to make the decision, not me. Never negotiate alone, ever. And finally, it always fails in the trials. When you do it, you never negotiate desperately. If you're like, oh gosh, we really need to make payroll, and so we really need this trial, and I don't think we're going to do well, and I don't think we're going to be able to support our patients with it, but we just need the money, so just accept it. You're asking for trouble, sites. You're only delaying a really, really, really bad thing, especially when you start including patients in the mix. So never take it personally, never do it alone, never negotiate desperately. It can subside the stress, but honestly, at some point, you're just going to have to acknowledge that the stress is there and use it, redirect it in a way so that you can have a positive experience in the negotiation. Okay. Today, we're going to talk about the book. We're continuing our journey. This book is on Amazon. There's the QR code. If you don't want to buy it on Amazon, no worries. Contact CRPN directly. We can give you 10% off the book and we'll give you free shipping. So, P.S. I know that there's folks out there buying the book. I can see it on the metrics when I log into Amazon. And I really want you to know that we support you, that you are supporting a very good mission, and that you are greatly appreciated. Thank you for supporting CRPN. Okay, so we talked about the three main chunks of a trial cycle. We went to pre-study. That's everything before a signed contract. We just did the research. We are in active study. Now let's talk about post-study, everyone. Post-study is very interesting because it's that time where you're still obligated to do things under contract. You still have to do work, but the money dries up. There is no more money in post-study. Sometimes contracts will say it's at the sponsor's expense, something like that, but very rarely have I seen money be exchanged in the post-study cycle. However, it is very long. There's a huge duration about it. And honestly, you've got a lot of work ahead of you, sites. So you better be ready when you are doing your pre-study and active study phases. You better start holding money back on the amount of work that you have to do on post-study. And you better negotiate for it properly. I just saw a negotiation. They came back and they said, okay, well, we'll give you $2,000 to archive on this trial. $2,000. $2,000. That's, I mean, I don't know why. For one, they're going to say, well, all the other sites took it. All the other sites took $2,000, so you should too. That's the fair market value based off of what other sites are accepting, not off of the actual cost of performing the trial. Guys, I'm telling you, we'll talk about archiving and record retention and all that stuff later as far as costs go, but sponsors, you are way off. And there's no way you're ever going to validate that cost when you're throwing $2,000 at a site to hold on for something for literally decades. It's just, anyway, that's a soapbox. We'll talk about it. If you have experience with document storage and you ever want to share it, please feel free to reach out. All right, so let's talk about post-study. Post-study is a very interesting situation, again, because most of the time you're doing it without additional funding. But it's that time at which you have a site closeout. The site is closed out. The CRA came, they did all the reconciliation, they closed out the site, data, everything. And then you wait. And then all of a sudden, you're in this holding pattern for the post-study. First and foremost, you have complete data oversight still. There are many, many case studies of how after a site's been closed out, six months, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years later, sponsors are still sending sites things that they have to put in their files. Sometimes it's a USB drive, sometimes it's a file, sometimes it's closure, sometimes it's a notification of an FD. So the sites are still working in post-study, but they're not getting paid for it. The contract is over. The contract money ends at the closeout date, everyone. But you're not off the clock. You're still doing work. And after I do mean after. Normally, what happens is sites are going to sit there and say, okay, we will have access to the folders and binders for 2 years after you close this out. We'll keep them on site. That way, if anything comes up, if the FDA comes knocking at our door, if you need us to add something to it, we're going to have it readily available right there for you so that we can add it to the documentation, which, by the way, that itself takes management, it takes storage, it takes staffing to manage and make sure that everything's filed away. Sites, you're not getting paid for that. Get ready for it. But after that 2 year mark, generally after 2 years, what's going to happen is there is going to be something that switches. It's going to be, okay, well, it's been 2 years. We haven't heard anything for a while. We're going to move this to a long-term document storage kind of an area. Like you've got your Iron Mountains of the world. Sometimes you've got the electronic storage now, things like that. But again, it's cost every time you have to retrieve the documentation. That's cost every time you have to pull or pay for storage. That's cost that sites you're going to have to pay for, because I guarantee the $2,000 that you got for archiving is not going to cover it. So you go from on-site to long-term storage. If you're paper, if you're an electronic form, it's going to be long-term storage or in some kind of an archive. Sometimes sites are limited on accessing it so many times a month, but whatever it might be, here you are in a holding pattern of continuous data management, continuous filing. Sometimes if the FDA does come knocking at your door 5 years later, you're going to have to call the record storage place, say, hey, I need you to pull this box right here. They pull the box, bring it, charge you for it. You retrieve it, give it to the FDA, let them see it. When you're done, you put it back in the box, call them, say, hey, pick this up. They take it back and charge you again. Again, you're not going to get any money for this sites, so be ready for it. And by the time everything is said and done, you are continually monitoring physical media and USBs because they only last for 5 years. You're continually categorizing boxes so that you know where these documents are. They have to be easily retrievable, and you are not off the clock, but the money stops. It's huge. So eventually, what's going to happen is FDA could come and go, sponsors could come and go. It is at risk. You don't know, it's not guaranteed it's going to happen, but it certainly can happen. But according to law, there is a certain amount of time that sites are going to have to hold on to these documents. And eventually, your contractual obligations end after generations of professionals have left your site. There will come a time where you're going to sit there and say, okay, we've held on to this for long enough according to contract. We've followed our contractual obligations. Yeah, it's time to get rid of it and we'll move on to the next one. Sites, are you thinking about that when you negotiate? Just out of curiosity. If not, there's a really good podcast about that. We talk about it more. It's huge. Finally, the time has come. Sites, you have to read your contracts, or at least have it spelled out in your contracts so that decades later someone will know what to do. But it's going to be either you are going to destroy the records, or you're going to return to the sponsor at the sponsor's expense. I've never seen a sponsor pay for it, although sometimes they're going to say, yeah, go ahead, we'll pay for all the shipment and everything, but they're never going to pay you to process it. So that's one thing to know. All right, so just so you know, I have my messages up, email, LinkedIn. If you're watching live, please feel free to send a comment. Let me know, and we'll be monitoring that and answering as we go. Okay, so with that said, let's talk about record retention real quick. I wanted to show you exact examples. Again, we're talking about case studies here. I'm not going to do things verbatim out of respect for sponsors and contracts and confidentiality, but generally, when it comes to record retention, the contracts are going to say a number of things. Number one is they're going to say, depending on how you negotiated it, that the institution is going to store these documents for X number of years or in accordance to applicable law. Generally, when it comes to X number of years, it used to be, I remember when I started, it was always the token number was 15 years. Okay. But then the EU kicked in. And the EU said, no, we want 25 years. So now we're starting to see many, many more moving up to 25 years after the site has closed out, or applicable law. And we'll go back to applicable law here in a minute. The other thing that you have to watch for in your contracts is many times it will say that the institution shall not destroy records without prior notice to the sponsor. In other words, when that time comes, you're going to have to try to notify the sponsor and say, hey, we've met our contractual obligations. We plan on destroying this. Read your contracts carefully. Sometimes it spells it out. Sometimes you have to give the sponsor so many days to make that decision if they want you to destroy the documents. Sometimes you have to put things in there where you notify the sponsor when you move the documents. In other words, that 2 years on site over to long-term storage, some of the contracts will say, you have to let us know where you're sending this, and we have to authorize it and approve it. And there's all kinds, depending on what sponsors do, there's a huge thing around that. And then you can always negotiate the term at sponsor's expense. Many times it will. But again, I have never seen a sponsor sit there and say, oh yeah, we'll give you more money. For one, they don't really have a contract to execute off of because the other one is long gone because of the IWO. We talked about IWO. You have an IWO for 60 to 90 days post closeout. This is years. So how are they going to execute based off of that? It's just this really weird paradigm of record retention versus the compensation versus what was promised in a contract versus how it can actually be executed, which it won't, it doesn't. So let's go back to applicable law. So generally what will happen is, oh yeah, we'll follow applicable law. That's generally many times when sites negotiate record retention, they want to go to applicable law. Sponsors will say, we want a flat number of years to be conservative. Sites go, no, applicable law. So this is directly from the CFR. There's the website below. This is what CFR 312.62 says about applicable law when it comes to investigator record keeping and record retention. It says this record retention, an investigator shall retain records required to be maintained under this part of a period of 2 years following the date a marketing application is approved for the drug for the indication for which it has been investigated. You clause much, CFR? That's insane. Or if no application is to be filed, or if the application is not approved for such indication until 2 years after the investigation is discontinued and FDA is notified. Whoo, what a mouthful. So you see 2 years a lot there, but it's 2 years from when? 2 years from FDA decision is generally a way to think about it. And I laugh when I read this CFR and then I go to negotiate because the negotiators, who I don't think, they don't really have an idea of what's going on. They'll say, oh, no, you only have to hold it for 2 years, so we shouldn't have to pay for 15 years. Well, that might be true for a device study. Sometimes you don't need to hold it onto it for that much for a device study, but they latch onto that 2 years and they don't let go. But you're sitting here saying, no, 2 years from an FDA decision. Well, how are we going to know that? What do you think, guys? If you're listening right now, how would you just determine that date of which to calculate the 2 years on 2-year decision? Answer is clinicaltrials.gov. Look up the trial. There's this really cool thing about here about this very special dates of a trial. After a trial is closed, you're going to start monitoring that, and eventually you're going to say, oh, there it is. We have an FDA decision now. It's this date. We can calculate 2 years from there. Our contract says applicable law. There you go. So within 2 years, we're going to follow the contract, notify the sponsor, whatever it might be. And it does average sometimes between 12 to 15 years. And I have seen some 25-year ones when an FDA has a really tricky time doing it. But the point is, that's another task that you have to pay for, sites, is you have to have the ability to check out clinicaltrials.gov and to sit there and say, oh yeah, 2 years from FDA decision, that's what the contract says, boom, boom, we're done. You're going to have to eat that cost because sponsors aren't paying for it. So sponsors, sites, CROs, if you have any questions about record retention and the actual costs, not what's getting negotiated in contracts, but the actual costs, you should really check this out because, and I've told this to sponsors before, the most important thing about this entire process is your data. That's it. And for some reason, you go through here, you spend all of this money doing the work, and then you just leave your data high and dry. You don't have sites with support to do the data, to support the data, to represent the data, to look at FDA. So it's like you get to the finish line and you're like, nah, I quit. I'm good. Anyway, I don't understand record retention. It's that weird thing that nobody wants to pay for, but it's the most important thing for an entire trial. So I hope that maybe we can try to figure that out. So, um, what does the finance team do during post study? That's a lot of the services and regulations, but where's the finance team get involved in this? Well, first and foremost, after you are done with a trial, it's really important to check out the budget, validate the budget to the actual costs of the trial so that you can determine if you did okay. Were you losing money as a result of some unexpected costs? Maybe it was a certain CFR, maybe procedure that was added halfway through that just completely ruined the trial's budget. Tell me, sites, and unfortunately, I think I know the answer for many of you. How many of you do a financial debriefing after the closeout visit? You analyze the costs. That's assuming that you assign cost centers to each of your trials to make sure that none of them were money sinks. But then after you analyze the costs, you compare it to the contract and you do a complete deep dive debrief into the finances of a clinical trial. It's not a paid service. It's an internal analysis. And so as a result, I almost guarantee you that every single one of you sites out there, because it's not going to generate revenue for you, you're going to be like, we don't need to do it. Let's just move on to the next startup. Okay. But good luck trying to get a decent contract negotiated in the future when you're not looking and analyzing and validating the past contracts and costs. So prime example is I had a site, they did a trial and they lost a crap ton of money on the trial. It was bad. But what happened was the sponsor came back to them. They were a preferred site, likely because they were cheap and they were affordable. And the sponsor came up and said, okay, well, you accepted this budget. So here's a brand new trial. Go ahead and accept this one too. And the site's like, we can't. And the sponsor's like, well, why not? You accepted this one and you just finished that trial. And yeah, and we lost a ton of money as a result. I'm sorry, but we analyzed the trial, we analyzed our costs, and we have to increase our rates. I'm sorry. And this, oh, you can't do that. It hasn't been long. No, we can. It's independent contractor world. We can charge whatever we need to. If you don't like this, you're welcome to walk away, but we cannot compromise patient quality just so that you can have another low budget. It's not going to happen. Super, super important to have a debrief. And then after you have the debrief, you have to do something with the data. That's when you do site study cost assessments. That's when you can create your own internal rate sheets to control your negotiations. This is what we have to do. This is what we have to make if we want to be responsible. There's a lot of data, a lot of reports, and a lot of data analytics so that that finance team post-study can drive the future negotiations for the next pre-study cycle in a responsible way. Huge feedback mechanism loop. I think that's the key as far as the post-study and the finance team goes, is you are making sure that the trial that has ended, and it has ended with a financial responsibility around it. All right, so let's move on to our case studies. So we still have questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. Happy to look at them. If you didn't make it because it's Monday and everyone's super busy, no worries at all. Please feel free. You're welcome to email, send a LinkedIn, whatever it is, off hours, off the live event. We'll address them. We'll look at them next time. And it is completely anonymous. So we made a decision. If you ask a question here at CRPN Central and you are going to send me a message or an email or whatever it might be, it is by default anonymous. I'm not interested in sharing names. So, all right, this came in this week. It said, we were just informed that the sponsor put their trial on hold during the negotiations. Does that mean that we won't be paid for anything for our prep? Oh boy. Okay, so if you're in the vaccine space right now, this may have happened to you a few times. I know that there are a lot of trials that were ready to go and now they're not anymore. They pulled the plug on it while they were onboarding sites. The obligation to pay a site for all of that pre-work, all of that IRB submissions, all the time that you're taking, receipt of sometimes supplies and supply kits, even equipment that you're now going to have to return, all of that um, is not contractually obligated to be paid to you sites. If you don't have a contract signed, they don't owe you anything. Sponsors and CROs, they will not owe you anything. There are sponsors out there who have, in good faith, said, you know what, we recognize that you worked really hard for this. We're really sorry about it. Send us an invoice and we'll pay you for your prep time. Um, and sites, don't be afraid to ask for that. There have been sites, they said, look, we just did a lot of work for you. Can you at least just pay us for something? Pay us for the submissions, pay us for the staff time to review it, pay us something so that we can compensate for all of the resourcing that we just provided to the trial that now you're not going to do. I have seen sponsors say, you know what, you're totally right. We have approval. We're going to pay you this amount of money. It's a subsidy. It's not going to be a lot of money, but you're getting something for your efforts. But unfortunately, there are, especially some of the smaller sponsors, they're just going to say, "Oh, well, sorry, you're out of luck." And by law, they're allowed to do that. That's what they can do. The only recourse that you have their sites is to make the decision whether or not to work with them again. They could be on your list of unpreferred sponsors, the high risk sponsors, the ones that if you did ever do a trial with them again, it would probably be at an increased rate because of the high risk. There's a lot of contention around that, and so I think it's really important for the sites and the sponsors and the CROs to all come together and have an understanding when this happens. Because I guarantee you, sites, you're not going to be the only ones who are disappointed about this. There's probably, the sponsor, the trial managers, the clinical managers, those groups. They just had their entire project, the plug pulled. What are they going to do? They're going to have to go shift to something else. Maybe who knows what's going to happen? Maybe some of them lost their jobs. So it's not good news for anyone, but if you were to address this with respect and understanding of everyone and uh, not expect a guaranteed payment, but if you cordially say, we worked really hard, are you willing to pay us for this in a nice and respectful way? There is a history of sponsors compensating for that. The sponsor keeps telling me that my site staff have to attend a weekly meeting, but the contract isn't paying for it. Are we required to go to meetings that are not paid? I have seen this so many times. Generally, what happens is you have a zealous, an overzealous CRA or a CRO representative who they're like a project manager. They're trying to get these things done. They may have been paid billable hours to do a certain set of meetings, or they may have a metric where they have to do what we call booster calls. You guys know what a booster call is? Booster call being that call that the CRO or sponsor do to sites, maybe the PI coordinators, groups like that, to understand why recruitment and enrollment is not happening. As a result, it's pretty challenging because now you have these overzealous, sometimes egotistical. I'll be honest, they're kind of egotistical. They're saying, "Oh, well, we need to schedule a booster call. We need to do this. We want to have this." And sites, you got to be real careful. If you do multiple trials and you let those CRAs walk all over you like that, you are going to find yourself spending six figures worth of time, effort, and resourcing without a drop or a dime of compensation in return. So to answer your question is most of the time the early sites are yes sites and they'll sit there and say, yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, sure, no problem. We'll have this call. We'll have that call and we'll do this. And odds are sites, you're going to be the only ones on that call who are not compensated for your time. I guarantee you the CROs out there who are scheduling that time, they're either charging a billable hour or they're getting paid a salary, but you aren't. Sometimes the Sometimes the teams will call it the cost of doing business. That's a common term. And so you sit there and say, okay, well, yeah, but the cost of doing business is costly. It costs money. And there's very rarely in a contract do sites agree that they will do work without pay. As independent contractors, you have services that you agree upon, you have rates that you agree upon, and anything that is extra, anything that is not mentioned in the contract is what they call out of scope. Let's see what CROs do. CROs use the OOS term all of the time. That's why we have change orders. That's why you have amendments to contracts, because you have certain things that were expected in a trial, and then reality kicks in. And you're going to need extra expenses. You're going to need extra costs. So CROs will go to sponsors all the time and say, oh, this is out of scope. I'm sorry. We're going to have a change order. We're going to have to amend the contract. We need more money to do this work for you. Guys, CROs do it. There's no reason why sites can't do it either. Sites, if you sign a contract and then you have a CRA who is constantly badgering you, we want weekly calls. You have to talk to us. These are mandatory. Your PI and all of your physicians have to show up. You have to do this. If you are ever in a situation where they're demanding these things, it is super duper important that you sit there and say, okay, no problem, but this is costing a lot of resources. Show me in the contract where I can bill for this, and then we'll set up the meetings. And generally, what will happen is it's going to be a CRA who has no idea what the contract's about. They're going to sit there and say, oh, well, I'll forward you over to our finance team and they'll tell you how to bill for it. Finance teams comes back and they said, oh, no, there's nothing in the contract that pays for this. This is just supposed to be part of the service. You say, okay, well, if it's not in the contract, then it's not part of the service. We're out of scope here. So once we figure out a way that we can bill our time to your trial, then no problem. Let us know. Then we can get that pathway created, and then we can start scheduling the meetings. It can go really, really long. It can be like, well, don't you want to be part of this trial? Well, yeah, but we kind of need to be paid to do it. That's why the contract's in place. So it goes back and forth. But to answer your question, you monitor it with your finance team and your legal team, because who knows what was discussed and what's actually in the contract. But generally, most of the time, you don't have to attend free calls. You should, that's never the expectation by the contract, at least. It is fully the expectation by the CRO. They'll call the sites. They expect the sites to show up because that's just what sites do. Sites, you need to be paid for that. And the more sites that sit back and say, oh, he's really right. The contract says this and they're asking that, it's out of scope. I don't have to do it by contract. You'd be surprised how many times that pushback helps you to get some of the resources that you need to succeed. All right, so we're going to wrap this up. I put this up here last week. Anyone out there want to give any comments about what's going on with this? I didn't get anything back, so I'm not going to answer it yet. But what I am going to say is take a look at this screen and tell me what's missing in this negotiation. I'll give you a hint. You need to separate this out by time and the 3 pillars of the clinical research site. And we'll talk about pillars later, but for those of you with the books, check this out. Let me know what you think about it. What would you do to change this? And what provisions would you require, knowing the timeline, the screen fill ratios, and the indication? What contractual provisions would you require at your site to perform this trial? If you don't know it yet, send me a message. We'll go over it eventually. It's still going to be there. I'm not going to just give it away, guys. But importantly, if you're not going to Manassa Summit in Chicago, Illinois, then you could be missing out, because my objective will be to take something like this and to literally break it down to a point where by the time you leave that discussion, you are going to have a general idea about how to dissect a list of invoiceables on a negotiation and how to ensure that your site is fully supported at all times. So it's going to stick around here. I'm waiting on those of you out there to let me know what you would do here in this situation. All right, we're at 35 minutes. This is Dr. Fox. Please like, comment, subscribe, share your voice. There are all the different ways that you can get a hold of us. There's the website, YouTube, LinkedIn. Feel free to email me, whatever it might be. CRPN is here to serve you. So please like, comment, subscribe, share your voice. See you next time.